And just like that, we're off. Guys, this is episode 20, okay? And it's our college football week 5 kind of quarterback standouts of the week. And going with a little bit of a different list here this week. And if you notice something already different about episode 20 and what will be episode 21, we are going through an ACS monologue today. Mitch is sick. I'm sure he had some fun down there with his co-eds and his teammates after this past weekend. But, more importantly, I just pray for him and just hope that he gets better. He's got a little bit of the flu, and it seems to be that the cold's going around. But either way, I love you, Mitch, and I'm ready to rock and roll today. So as we look at college football in week 5, I think that there were some standouts, and there were some standouts in some big victories, and big victories for different reasons. So the first one we're going to go with is Jalen Milroe, obviously from the University of Alabama. Then we're going to go with Noah Fafita, the quarterback down in Arizona who beat Utah this past weekend. Number 10 in the country, was able to go into that house and beat them. And then Michael Hawkins from Oklahoma. And the reason that we're going to talk about these three is there are different reasons why these guys are here. And I think as you listen to me talk about it, you'll kind of hear the full complexities as to why these three are the guys that we chose. And ultimately, how at quarterback we can be recognized for standout performances for a multitude of different reasons. We talk about the quarterback position. We talk about playing really well as the focused guy in a big game, or doing the things you need to do to win within the scope of a game, or being a young cat on the road and being able to step up when you're needed, even though the game, didn't really flow for you at any point during the game. And that's kind of the three examples that we have this week. But let's get straight into it, guys. And what we're going to talk about first is Jalen Milroe. Obviously, this guy is somebody who is one of the best quarterbacks coming back in college football this season. And as he prepares to play Georgia, it's that premier matchup between Georgia and Alabama. It's in Tuscaloosa. Big time implications on the game. Big time implications just in terms of really setting the stage for we are here as a national championship contender, and whichever team won that game was going to be the leader in the clubhouse in the SEC in terms of who you look at as that power team as we go through the rest of the season. Texas is right there, obviously, but Texas hasn't played that huge game yet. And Georgia already beat Clemson, and Clemson is showing to be one hell of an opponent. And so for Alabama to take Georgia on in this situation, there was a lot going into the game that he was going to have to do to play successfully and to ultimately come out of that game with a victory. We talked about last week how we felt that Georgia probably had the edge in the game just because Carson Beck is asked to do a little bit less than what Jalen Milroe is asked to do. And we said, quote, last week, Jalen Milroe is going to have to play like Superman for these guys to beat Georgia this week down in Tuscaloosa. And have to play like Superman. Superman is exactly what he did, man. He showed up, and let's go through his stat line really quickly, which doesn't even do the full story. I'll jump into how he did it in a second. But let's just sit here and look at these stats for a second. 27 of 33 through the air. That is an 81% completion percentage against what's been the best defense in college football the last 5 years, for 374 yards. A big stat that we pay attention to as college coaches up in college football is take the number of pass attempts that you had, which in this case was 33, and then look at your total yards, which in this case was 374. Okay? I'm no mathematician brainiac, but I know for a fact that that's over 10 yards per attempt. Anything that's over 7 yards per attempt, meaning my coach up in the box calls a pass play and we gain more than 7 yards on that play, is an incredibly efficient and explosive day through the air. He had 2 touchdowns passing, and then you look at what he did on the ground. 16 carries for 117 yards and 2 touchdowns. Guys, that puts him at just about 500 yards of total offense and accounted for 4 touchdowns against the best defense in the country up until this point, and in the biggest game of the year in all of college football. To play that way in that environment, in that situation, is a credit to him, a credit to his coach, a credit to their approach, and ultimately, this is what he's been doing all season. But the biggest thing that I want to point out about what Jalen Milroe was able to accomplish this past weekend is if you look at his stats for the season, he's thrown for 965 yards. That includes this past week. Do some simple math there. If I subtract 375 yards from 970 yards, 965 yards, I'm looking at an average of 200 yards per game going into this game through the air. And he threw for 374 against the Georgia Bulldogs. If you look at his rushing stats are 273 yards on the ground through the season. Subtract the 117 from this past week, he's averaging 50 yards on the ground. So he went above his passing average by 175 yards this week against Georgia, and he went above his rushing total by another 65 yards against Georgia. That is now where you start to look at his season, and you start to go, this guy has accounted for 18 touchdowns, 10 through the air, 8 on the ground, and 1 interception. Ridiculous ratio, ridiculous efficiency, and he gave it to you when his best was required. And that's really what we're going to talk about with him, is when you look at the first half of that game, it was a dominant performance from Alabama. Well, that means that he took the throws he needed to early. He made the big throws that he needed to early. He beat you with his legs early. And that momentum that they created in the first half affected Carson Beck. It affected Georgia. And then ultimately, even despite what happened in the second half, which was really just a beautiful performance by Georgia's offense in that second half, what Jalen Milroe did early in the game and a couple plays he was able to make late in the game was enough to beat one of the best teams in the country in the biggest matchup of the year in college football. What I want to comment on is this guy already going into this season has always had the ability to run the football in, dare I say, a Lamar Jackson type of way. When he turned up the sidelines and took off for that 45-yard touchdown, and I believe it was the second quarter, I turned to my brother and I said, that has to be the fastest player in college football. We all know what he's been able to do with his legs. Now we talk about what he's been able to do with his arm. He's always been a good passer, guys. Always been a good passer. But when we talk about being a great passer versus a good passer, there's a substantial difference there. The difference to me is a great passer is throwing guys open. A great passer is putting the ball in the only location where a receiver can catch it based on where the defense is. And that guy with his ball location is able to create plays that a good passer's ball location wouldn't be able to make. This is where I see Jalen Milroe on the fringe here. I believe he has been a good passer to this point that is now stepping into that great category. And it was a hell of a game on Saturday, so it's easy to say that. You know, they slowed down a little bit in the second half, but just the confidence in which he's throwing the ball and the way he's throwing the ball, I think has a lot to do with him and Kalen DeBoer being on the same page, him having worked all offseason, throwing the ball and continuing to grow in that area. And now you're seeing, right now, the most complete player in all of college football. The guy that is the biggest weapon offensively in all of college football. And which is why Travis Hunter is his own conversation on the defensive side of the ball, but if we look offensively, he is your leader for the Heisman Trophy. To do it in that situation, to lead your guys and to have that type of competitive temperament and be able to play at that level against the best defense in the country and account for almost 500 yards of total offense. Jalen Milroe, huge tip of the cap, bro. It's awesome to see you continue to grow. And really, as we look at the rest of the season now, he has laid the foundation for that confidence to be in place to say, we are the best team in the country. Come beat us. So Jalen is the best player right now in the country, playing his best when his best was required, which was Saturday night in Tuscaloosa. The next situation is Noah Fafita. Noah Fafita, to this point, is probably known as the Arizona quarterback for being a shorter guy with a lot of moxie who has played well so far throughout his career. What I marvel at when I watch Noah Fafita is I watch a player with incredible football IQ who it's very clear through his presence that his team on offense goes as he goes, and he's the unequivocal leader of that team. To step into Salt Lake City, Utah, against the number 10 team in the country, regardless of whether Cam Rising is playing or not, and to be able to get your team to play at a level where you guys confidently go in and beat that football team, it says a hell of a lot about the way that you were able to lead your offense and keep them composed when the situations matter. I told you that we had 3 guys that are all in here for different reasons today. That different reason for Noah Fafita is pretty average stat line. He had 19 for 31. That's a 62% completion percentage for just under 200 yards at 197 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. So why is this guy on the list? In all of college football, why is this guy one of the 3? He took his team on the road into a brutal place to play against a great defense, and he made the plays that were required to win the game. What I mean by that is when you go in and you're playing a top 10 team in the country in a raucous environment. I talked about in the previous episode, I played in Salt Lake. Like, that place is crazy. You have some of these stadiums in college football that just support like amplified noise, and they tend to be much louder than you would expect. I'm pretty sure Utah only seats like 45, 50,000 people. Yet, I've been in stadiums with 80 that don't sound anywhere close to the way that it sounds in Salt Lake with just under 50. So I know what that stadium sounded like on Saturday. And that guy stood in there, and especially in the 3rd and 4th quarter, he made the plays to win the game. What are the plays to win the game? When he's about to get sacked, being able to leave the tackle box as he's about to get sacked and throw the ball into the ground to prevent them from having a loss of yards. These are major momentum plays, guys, because when you have a team that's struggling on offense, which Utah struggled on offense all night, and they are desperately looking for any swing of momentum, and Noah Fafita played the game the way the game needed to be played in order to win. He never allowed that momentum to switch places. To me, that's somebody with very, very high football IQ. It's somebody who's playing wise beyond their years. And then there were a couple big 3rd down conversions that he needed to make through the air that he was able to put on the money in difficult scenarios against a great defense with pass rush in his face. And so, guys, when you watch Noah Fafita throughout the rest of the season and throughout his career, you're talking about a 5'9" athlete, 5'9", and that may even be generous when you watch him on the field playing, and you go, how does that 5'9" guy step out there and play at the level that he's playing at? And how does he beat out some of these guys who may be bigger, stronger, faster in these situations? You do it by all of your intangibles being in place. Being a guy with high football IQ, high leadership, make the smart plays when the plays need to be made, knows when the opportunities are there to take chances, and also knows when he shouldn't take those chances. It never felt like Utah was going to win that football game. And we got to tip our cap to Arizona's defense, but the way that Fafita was able to play in terms of controlling those game-changing momentum plays and making sure that he prevented any of those plays from happening, and then those big 3rd down conversions that were required in the second half, Noah Fafita is the guy this week that played exactly the way he needed to play, nothing more, nothing less, to beat a top 10 team on the road. Our 3rd situation was Michael Hawkins. Guys, Auburn is a ridiculous environment to try to step into and play, let alone as a true freshman. And I remember as a true freshman for me, I was starting up in Major Division I college football, and the game is just moving really fast. The energy in the stadium is super chaotic, and I personally reveled in it just because I thought I had the least amount of expectations that I was ever going to have during my career on me as an 18-year-old. But whether that was Michael Hawkins' perspective or not, what I applaud, and I said that these situations were going to be different, so much was the game was slow. He was 10 of 15 in the entire game for 161 yards. Pretty average pedestrian, stat line there. 66% completion percentage, played well, but also had 14 carries for 69 yards and a touchdown. So what I look at when I look at Michael Hawkins' performance was not the first quarter, not the second quarter, not the third quarter. It's a true freshman on the road at Auburn, down 21-10 in the fourth quarter with about 9.5 minutes left to play. And he steps up and makes a couple huge plays and is aggressive on a deep ball that he connects with for 65 yards and a touchdown, swings the momentum of that game. It's 21-16 now. I believe they missed the PAT. And then Auburn throws a pick six. And then Oklahoma gets the ball back, controls most of the rest of the game and the clock. And a true freshman for OU, where things for 3 quarters they were down by double digits, and he's having to keep his offense going, makes a couple huge plays when it's required in the fourth quarter to win that game. So Jalen Milroe, Noah Fafita, and Michael Hawkins, to me, to Mitch, after talking about it, we think that those are the 3 standout performances of the week. A couple other mentions here that had bigger stat lines for sure is we've mentioned him before, but Darian Mensah at Tulane, a redshirt freshman playing great football. This guy was 18 for 22 against a decent USF team that stuck it to Alabama for at least a half there. 18 for 22 for 326 yards and 3 touchdowns. It's the way he's doing it. He makes everything look easy. And that's what I've said many, many times when I was the director of recruiting at the University of Missouri and I was evaluating quarterbacks, or I was the quarterback coach at the University of Missouri evaluating quarterbacks. The first thing I always looked at on tape, if we're not talking intangibles and character, if we're talking just what I'm watching on the tape, I want to see guys that make things look easy. Guys that have pressure in their face, that are able to make plays, and it looks like they were never rushed, never panicked. They were able to make it easily. Guys that when the throw is there and it's on schedule and it's easy, put the ball in great ball location to give the receiver information to be able to allow him to do what he does with it. And then guys that can step outside the box and make a couple plays that weren't there. Darian Mensah, for a redshirt freshman, is making plays in all of those categories, all of them. So if you haven't watched Tulane yet this season, that's a guy who's going to be fun to watch and will continue to rise and become one of the best quarterbacks in college football over the next couple years. The other one is Chandler Morris at North Texas. Chandler Morris at North Texas, they beat Tulsa 52-20. I got to watch him earlier in the season this year when they played South Alabama, and it was just back and forth between him and Gio Lopez, and he's just throwing the ball really well. He's making plays with his legs, and they're chucking it. So he was 22 for 34 for 439 yards and 5 touchdowns. Chandler Morris, son of Coach Morris from Arkansas, and has had a pretty good career as a coordinator for sure. Has had a little bit rougher time as a head coach, but a coach's son who's playing really well, playing at a high level, and to do what he's doing through the air just speaks volumes about the way he's processing information, the way he's getting the ball out of his hands, and the way he threw it against Tulsa this past weekend was pretty impressive. Now, what I like to do to finish this segment every week is I like to give you guys kind of a preview of the week ahead and any big quarterback matchups. This week, it's a little bit lighter than it was this past week, but there are 2 games that kind of stick out to me. You have Missouri and Texas A&M, where you have Brady Cook, who is a returning redshirt senior who had a really, really good season this past year. And now this year, their offense hasn't fully got it going yet, but they've played some teams where their best hasn't been required. To play Texas A&M on the road and to go in there against a good football team and beat them, his best is going to be required this week. It's going to be interesting to see how Brady Cook answers that call. Then Marcel Reed, the quarterback at Texas A&M, he's a freshman. And that freshman went into the swamp, and that's where he got his feet wet. And since then, what I'm seeing is I'm seeing a lot more comfortability in the way that Coach Klein, the offensive coordinator, is calling plays with the dual threat ability of Marcel Reed back there. So I think Texas A&M's offense is continuing to evolve and continuing to show that they can do more things. And then you have Missouri with a lot of firepower over there on the offensive side of the football and a really good defense. So that one will be a fun one to watch for you guys. I believe that's a morning game on Saturday. at Kyle Field in Texas A&M, man, which is a crazy environment to play in. So we'll see how Luther Burden and Brady Cook respond on the road in their first big real test. They played Boston College, but this one's going to be a real test on the road in an SEC matchup to start off SEC play for these guys. The other one is, Tennessee. Nico is he's playing about as good a football at the quarterback position as there is out there in the country. He's one of those top guys. You got a defense that's playing really well, and they go to Arkansas to play those guys, and you got Taylon Green over there at Arkansas who is making plays. So two taller guys that both are making plays with their arm and their feet. And Tennessee and Arkansas should be a good SEC matchup. Tennessee, we'd all think on paper, is going to go in there and get after them pretty good. But it seems that Arkansas this year, that's been the narrative, is that they were going to get pummeled or that they were going to struggle. And they've been a fighting football team this year. They've played people really, really tough and made teams earn that victory. So watching those two games going back and forth is just going to be quarterbacks that are exciting to watch. And my brother and I talk about it all the time. Like, those are the games we like to watch. We like to watch the games where you have quarterbacks on both sides that are going at it consistently through the week, through the game, and basically just seeing them respond to each other. So, guys, that's our quarterback week our standouts of the week in college football week 5. I went there for 21 minutes by myself. So I'd love to hear you drop in the comments how I did. Obviously got to get my boy Mitch back next week, but super excited to spend this time in here with you guys. And, again, getting you guys to reach out to us. And we've had a lot of outreach from a lot of parents and a lot of athletes that really benefit from just listening to, the standouts of the week and those things. But when we get under the helmet, we talk about the human and the emotional side of sports. And as we get through this season and into the off season, and you start to see all the guests that we've been recording episodes with, and we release those episodes, I think you guys will really, really see a holistic growth or development in becoming more aware of what college football really is, what football really is in general, and then the demands that are put on us mentally, physically, and spiritually at the quarterback position. So I'd love for you guys to drop in the comments whether you agree, disagree. If you want to give me a score on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd love to take that. I'd give myself probably about an 8.2, but I hope that you guys enjoyed that episode. Really look forward to getting back next week with my guy Mitch as we look at quarterback standouts in college football week 6.